going to go through a list of questions, and she's going to give us her insight on exactly how to answer this, or just how to, in general, approach these type of questions when they're asked in an interview. I have listed them in the description below, all the questions, so you can fast forward to the one that you're interested in or listen to all of them. But it's about 14 questions that we're going to go
Rapid
through.
fire.
So yeah, rapid fire. So we'll start with the biggest one, and it's tell me about yourself. So it's kind of like your little elevator pitch. This one, please listen to this one if you're not going to listen to the rest of the podcast. This is where my candidates have just lost. And it's just, to me personally, it's just like the most important question because it's usually asked in the beginning. But I'll let you answer how to answer. Tell me about yourself in an interview.
Yes. So I will start with one of the biggest mistakes that I see people make all the time. We talked about the rambling a little bit before, but people go down a rabbit hole of their personal lives where they want to tell me all about their childhoods. And you would be surprised. I know a lot of random fun facts about people. I think it's okay to sprinkle a little bit of some personal in there, but ideally the goal for this is I want to hear the hot topics, the big pieces that I need to know. Because as a recruiter, I have to pass this information off to the hiring manager. I need to make a recommendation to them. So I'll say what has stood out to me of candidates that I've heard, how they've answered this question. Candidates who don't just read their resume, but they add some context to their resume. So maybe they say something around like a couple of key accomplishments that they've had that speaks to some key aspects of their resume. Or I've even had candidates that just give me like, in this role, my top 3 responsibilities were boom, boom, boom. A great accomplishment that I had there was boom. I would even encourage like sprinkling in, one of my big things I like to tell people is, what is your superpower? So whether it's, I'm really detail oriented, or I'm creative, or I enjoy identifying challenges to be able to solve, being able to sprinkle a little bit of that interpersonal in there while also highlighting specific bullets that you have. But I love when candidates are able to give me a little extra context, and not necessarily like it doesn't have to be anything crazy, but really giving what are a couple of those quick key responsibilities, almost thinking about it like, what are the things that you almost do in your sleep with your role that maybe is really highlighted on the job posting, and then being able to tie it back to what you've excelled in and I do really, really well. Collaboration, whatever your superpower is, you say. But yeah, keeping it short, sweet, to the point. I don't necessarily need to know all about your personal life. And I got married and I have kids, which is great. But sometimes the danger in that is it introduces bias. So being really cautious about, it's okay to share personal, but don't share too much because it introduces things you may not want.
So yeah, tell me about yourself. Keep it short. Is there a certain amount of time? I think I kind of suggested times earlier, but what do you think? How long should tell me about yourself be?
Yeah, I honestly think that depends on how long you've been in the workforce. So someone who's more in that 3 to 5 years where you've only had like maybe 1 or 2 jobs, for like 2 minutes maybe. And this is again coming from a yapper, somebody who has a lot of words. And that's why even like I mentioned before, having that spreadsheet where if you need to reference some of those more specific things later on, there's probably going to be space for that and there'll be time for that. But what is something you really want to make sure at the very beginning that they know, those 2 to 3 things. But yeah, 2 to 3 minutes max.
Yeah, max.
So that's that early. If you have a little bit more of a lengthy career, I'm still going to try to encourage you to keep it short. Because we don't necessarily need to hear what you did 20 years ago. Try to keep it to the most recent 7 to 10 years.
Yes, I was just about to ask that, like, what should they be? Like, how many years back should they go? Is like the most recent. And I would say if you do talk about the beginning, get through it fast. Like I started my career here. I had multiple promotions within my first 10 years, which ended me up at this company 5 years ago.
And I promise they will ask what they want to know.
Exactly.
Yeah. One of the things, and this was very early on when I first started, like years ago, one of the things my dad told me when he was prepping me for like one of my very first interviews is be okay with the silence. Be okay when you pause. Yes. It's okay. When you've given your pitch where you've highlighted, these are a couple big things I was responsible for, move on. I was responsible for this and this, move on. And then once you get through it, sit. It's okay to be quiet. You don't have to fill the space.
All right. Sorry, that one I just wanted to spend a little bit more time on because it's just so important. Number 2, okay, we kind of went over this earlier, but what do you know about our company and the roles? It's a little repetitive, but anything you want to add to that? We mentioned that one in the beginning, but.
Yeah, I think we talked about it. That, I mean, Oh, you probably exhausted my tips that I've got for that. Taking a look at the LinkedIn, what are some unique things that you see, making sure you know the job. That's what I got.
Yeah. And you don't have to memorize
No,
like a whole list of 10 things, just
no,
again, kind of like 15, 30 seconds and you're
I
good
love
on
it.
that. It's
Yep.
not a test on how much you can remember.
No. Sorry.
Okay. Ooh, we kind of touched on this one, but not this specifically. What is your current compensation? If someone asks that, it's illegal to ask that in many states,
Yeah.
but not all states yet that I'm aware. I haven't really updated myself in the past few months, but is it illegal in all states now?
I don't know. And when I saw your question, I was like, are people allowed to ask that? People really ask
We
you?
used to ask it for years. Like my
Oh.
early career, we had to ask that and we had to get an answer. So at KBex, we were like, just cut the question,
Yeah.
ask what they're looking for.
And I'll be honest, I think from my perspective, I probably wouldn't feel comfortable sharing that. And
Yeah.
I would probably spin that and say something to the effect of kind of how I had talking about the curiosity piece, of, well, currently my role is a little bit different from, or it'll be different from what it is that you all may be doing. Their company size, like there's a lot of things, when it comes to this. So, I'd be more curious, almost flipping it. Like I'd actually be a little, you know what, now that you brought it up, I'm curious, what do you guys have budgeted for this role? Like flipping it back
Yeah.
on them in a professional way. But
Yeah.
personally, I would recommend not answering that question because
Yeah.
you don't want to box yourself in to where you're almost making like they box you in comp wise. So I'd be careful with that. Be careful. The only time that I could see a possibility is in a sales type of role and not necessarily wanting to know their exact
Mm.
compensation, but like they may
Oh,
ask a question around like your goals and your targets that you may have. And I would also keep that very broad and very general. And again, that's more just like an alignment stamp things too. And this is where I would probably ask questions of like, well, our compensation structure for bonuses and commissions are probably structured a little bit different. But for my current company, this is a little bit, but I probably still wouldn't give too much. I would keep it very high level and give a range. I wouldn't give an exact number.
yeah. Yeah. I agree too. I think another good way for sales, just coming from sales, if you don't want to say what you're making, you could say maybe how much, if you're comfortable, how much revenue you generated for the company.
That's a big one.
Okay, next question. Okay, I'm gonna skip that one. It was what compensation are you looking for? Because we went over that one pretty much in detail. So, why did you leave your last job as number 5?
So this is a delicate question, I would say, to answer. So I encourage people to be very cautious about not speaking too negatively about your previous employer. I have had candidates that I almost felt like I was in a venting therapy session with them, where they were going through in great detail. So really, and it sounds so cliche, but I mean, even being honest with yourself, self-reflecting with why is it that you're looking? Why did you make a transition? It's like typically the common reasons you're looking for growth, maybe wanting to expand on skill sets, test out a new industry. You wanted to try out a new type of role, maybe go after something you're a little bit more passionate about, something of that nature. I would just be really, really cautious about not necessarily speaking negatively about your previous employer, but more around what you were looking for in your next. What is it that you were trying to gain? What were you trying to get to versus this is why this was the most toxic place I've ever been.
Exactly. I want to get your thoughts on this real quick, and then we'll go to the next question. I've heard a couple candidates, and it's not as common recently, but we also hire like a little bit higher level. So it's people who are like
Mhm.
experienced interviewers. But
Yeah.
at the more junior candidate level, I've noticed like I've seen some interviews and they're like, why'd you leave your past 4 roles? Well, more money, more money, more money, more money. And what do you think of that? And what do you think a hiring manager thinks of that? Because that's kind of like new. I haven't really seen that until the last like 3-4 years, like post-COVID thing in a way.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I'm saying the same thing. So you're not alone, I promise.
Okay, good. I'm like, if it's just happened to me, I don't
You're
want to like
not
put
alone.
anyone in a group, but I'm like,
You're not alone. So I won't put out how old I am exactly. I give a little bit of grace there just because I know people that are a little bit earlier in their career, they really just don't know any better, to be completely honest, when
yeah,
they say that. And I even sometimes encourage a little bit without telling them, like, maybe not say it so explicitly like that. Because hiring managers some of them do see that as a red flag. And in some cases, it can be. But really being able to maybe speak to it a little bit more of like, yes, I have made a few transitions. I'm really wanting to continue to advance my career, develop new skill sets. And this opportunity afforded me the opportunity. Hate double words like that when I do it. But this opportunity afforded me the opportunity to upskill in certain areas, maybe the leadership style, whatever the case may be, and how you can flip it to give that hiring manager a little bit more comfort in knowing you're not going to leave them in 3 months, is really saying, and now I feel much more equipped to be in a position where I can contribute to an organization more long term. My goal is to be a little bit more established. I want to grow with the company. And I maybe even that's something too, is like I haven't found a company that affords me the opportunity to grow in the way that I want to. So now you're able to kind of reassure them like, yes, I've made some moves. It was intentional, it was strategic. But now I'm at a place in my career where I'm really looking to be able to grow, fine tune, and really contribute and bring value to an organization. So
yeah. So, okay, that is a good one. And one myth I want to like do a little myth buster real quick because I've seen this on LinkedIn. I don't know if you've seen this. It's probably been like a year since I've like really was a fad and being pushed in your face. But basically, they're saying that hiring managers or recruiters were turning them down because they were laid off. And I've never heard that from a recruiter. I don't know where that came from. I don't know if you've heard anything different, but I've never heard of a recruiter not moving forward with someone because they went through a layoff ever. But I don't know if is that, have you seen that? I mean, I'm in staffing, I've seen a lot of different companies. I've never, ever had a hiring manager say, oh, they were laid off, we're not interested, ever.
I have seen this on LinkedIn as well. And I have had to navigate these conversations before. I will say it's not necessarily me. It's not a me thing. But I've had these conversations and it's really unfortunate. And I'll say this is where, I know recruiters, sometimes we get a bad rap, but y'all don't know. We really are your biggest advocates. Sometimes you don't
We
know.
do get a bad rap.
We're behind the scenes having these conversations with these decision makers and the hiring managers. And I have navigated this conversation multiple times, I would say, with the hiring manager before, where it's like, hey, this person may have been impacted by layoffs, maybe 3, 6, 8 months, or maybe within a year, something like that. I know sometimes the concern is when it's been for a little bit longer amount of times, where it's like, if it's a few months, people are typically comfortable. And again, this is not necessarily me. I don't view it that way, but it could be if it's like more than 6 months or a year, there's a concern where it's like, well, now are you staying up to date on things? So maybe even like putting that freelancing work, if you're doing some freelancing things on your resume, or maybe some courses that you're taking, whatever it is to fill that time. It helps the recruiter navigate that conversation because I'm not going to reject you for that. I mean, it's not your fault that this happened. But more being able to speak to a little bit of what it is that you're doing in the interim. And of course, I know everybody's interviewing and applying for jobs probably, but if there's anything else that you're doing to kind of keep yourself in the know and stay in the loop and staying sharp on your skills that pertain to your role, it'll definitely help and kind of help debunk that a little bit.
Yeah, I have seen hiring managers get exactly like you said, a little bit weary, I don't know if that's the right word, of the gap length.
Yeah.
But I haven't seen them like just if someone got laid off last week, be like, oh, well, they got laid off. Like,
no.
I saw it on LinkedIn. I'm like,
no.
I was like, maybe I'm lucky with my hiring managers because they've never had them do that. But again, yeah, the gap though, I have, definitely questioned. That was great advice to just do something in the interim because they're going to ask you, what have you been doing in the interim? All right. So why should we hire you?
Oh, yeah. So this is where tying back some of those questions that you asked, remember we talked about that earlier, those questions. Mm-hmm. I would recommend answering those questions with how you're going to solve some of those things. Like, I understand that this is a goal for you. These are challenges for you. These are the skill sets that I bring. Not necessarily you're going to solve their problems day one, but here are a couple of skills that I bring that is going to help answer this challenge that you have. Here's how I can support with making that goal happen. Being able to tie back some of those experiences that you maybe have previously had in your last roles of like, I've navigated this type of challenges before. I would be excited to be able to jump in immediately to bring value to this. So I would recommend, because remember, you've prepared and you've got your questions, tying it back to where you can speak to those things. Because ideally interviews, the hiring manager, they really have, they want to get their questions answered. Yes. but they want to find somebody for the role. So make their job
Yeah.
easier. Give them the information that they need to make the decision, and make it an easy one, and make it you.
Yes, exactly. And that's important too. Just going back to asking your questions towards the end and not trying to overtake the interview to show like how intuitive you are or something. It's like now you gather the pain points.
Mhm.
Here's why you should hire me. You mentioned XYZ. Here's how I have fixed XYZ before and can do it for you. But if you can instill that confidence in the hiring manager and recruiter, you just probably got the job. Um,
Congratulations.
yeah, got the job. You're in. Oh, such good tips. I wish I had this podcast when I was looking for a job a long time ago. So, strengths and weaknesses.
This one I was the most excited about answering, I'm not gonna because I think this stumps people so much. So I mentioned it a little bit before, like having that spreadsheet where you really just brain dump out things that you've done, those accomplishments, all those things. Yes, use your spreadsheet to help you with this. But also, one of the things that I think people they sleep on themselves is, what are your superpowers? What is it that is unique to you that you're bringing into this position? Highlighting that in those strengths, because like of course they want to hear those tactical things. Yes, maybe highlighting a couple of those. But if this is a analytics role and you are a very detail oriented person where you identify areas for growth, you are mindful of small things, whatever it is that you want to say is like your unique you-ness that you bring. Like for myself, I'm very much of a people person. I'm very much creative. I'm relational, all those things. So for recruiting, this is perfect.
Right. Yeah.
So that's what I would say for those strengths. Really thinking about yourself. What is it that you bring that maybe somebody else doesn't have, in addition to some of those tactical things? Now, the weaknesses, I think it's the most common thing that people say, like, oh, well, flip it to a positive to where it's not that
Oh,
bad.
yeah.
Here's something that'll probably actually make you stand out, because we're all human and we all have things about ourselves that's not perfect. One of the
Mhm.
things that I encourage people to think about is, how do you hack yourself? So what is it that you do to help combat that weakness that you may have, or that area of growth? So like for myself, I'll use myself as an example. Administrative tasks are not my strength. I don't like them. They're tedious. But one of the ways that I hack myself is I set myself little rewards. So I'm like, okay, if you can sit and do administrative work for 15 minutes, here you go. Or maybe I block specific times for myself, or I turn on music that I really like to listen to bring me a little bit of joy while I'm doing something that I'm not good at and that I don't like. So whatever
Mm,
hack you may have for yourself, maybe if it's for other people, and maybe their weakness is public speaking. They get nervous about having to do presentations, but you may be a behind the scenes person that once a month you have to do presentations. So what is it that you do to prepare yourself for that? Is it maybe, hey, I prepare myself by going for a walk. I prepare myself by going through my notes to make sure that this weakness doesn't hinder me. So not
mhm.
necessarily that you have to flip it to a strength. I know that's probably the most common thing that people hear all the time, but
Yeah, I
I
don't know
will
where
be
that happened from. Yeah, I don't know. I'm
yeah,
like, what?
or they try to flip it to where it's not a big deal, but really, like,
Yeah.
what do you do to make this not impact your ability to have success? Um,
Yes,
and even,
exactly.
I mean, use technology sometimes. ChatGPT, like, hey, I'm really bad at whatever. How can I help myself? And it really may be something that you can practice and implement in real life, and not just saying
Yeah.
something just to say it. So hack yourself.
Exactly, exactly. And then I'll add one more thing too. I don't know if you ever see this, but when I ask candidates, sometimes they'll actually tell me a weakness that is directly related to the job, like a data entry specialist. What's your weakness? Oh, well, I can't type that fast. I'm like,
Oh no.
well, now I can't move forward with you.
Oh
Like,
no.
you leave me no choice. I can't. Everyone can be better at their jobs, but
Yeah.
just leave that weakness out. Like, if you're in sales, don't say, and you have to cold call 90% of the day, probably don't say cold calling. Even though you're probably not the best cold caller on a team you've been on in the past, just don't list that as your
Yeah.
weakness. And if it is a true weakness, you might need to look for a different job.
Yeah.
If your weakness is the bulk of a job you're going for, is just my personal like advice.
I encourage people that are like on this path where they don't necessarily know what they want to do next, and they're kind of struggling with what types of roles is good for them. What are you naturally good at? What is it that you naturally, without even thinking about it, what makes you excited? Like, I enjoy talking to people. I enjoy interacting and engaging. It brings a spark to me. I would be miserable sitting behind a desk having to silently work by myself and never talk to anybody. So yes, a data entry role would probably be detrimental to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but can I do some different things in spreadsheets enough to get by? And enough that I would need to for certain types of things, but lean into your strengths, lean into what it is that you're really good at and you're excited about versus trying to do something that is going to be an uphill battle for you just because you think it's going to make you more money. I promise there's money to be made in a lot of spaces.
Yes, and if you do something you're good at and passionate about, that money will come and you'll be like 5 years later, you'll be like, "Oh my gosh, I'm really running a whole department." Okay, awesome. All right, next one, number 8. Tell me about a conflict you've had in the workplace.
This is another good one. These are all really good. So I would say when thinking about conflict, I would try really hard to not try to place too much blame in a lot of spaces. Like really just speak more to the facts of the
Yes.
situation. Not necessarily, well, this person didn't do what they were supposed to do. And so now I had to clean this up. Cause now that's not really leaving a good taste in the hiring manager's mouth per se. And
Mhm.
it's not really helpful. So maybe that conflict could be there was a misalignment. Maybe we had a misunderstanding around a deadline that we were trying to figure out, or whatever the case may be. We had a deadline to meet. We were not on the same page. So there was we had to get clarity there. So really trying to keep it high level if possible. And not necessarily pointing fingers of, well, this person didn't do this and they should have done that. They never even said anything to me. And then really focusing more on your actions that you took. Because I think one of the things that a lot of people do in interviews is they focus on everybody else, but it's like, hey, right here. You're the one that's in the interview focusing on yourself. What are the actions that you took to resolve this and what was the outcome of it? How did you try to be proactive if possible? Or how did you maybe communicate through it? How did you navigate those things versus just saying what everybody did, more focusing on, hey, this is what the steps that I took to identify the conflict, to bring some solutions, because we don't want to just hear about all the problems, but
Mhm.
what did you do to contribute to helping resolve it?
Yeah, I think that question too, people ask or hiring managers, recruiters ask, not even to see like what was the conflict. It's
Yeah.
how are you going to talk about a conflict? Like
Mhm.
exactly like you said, are you going to put blame? Are you going to be self-accountable? They're actually looking for a soft skills type of answer. They don't care how big the conflict is. It's how are you talking about that
Yeah.
conflict? I guess you could categorize it as kind of like a trick question in a
Well,
way
we
because they're not looking for like there's not a right answer, there's a right delivery.
yeah.
In a
Yeah.
way. Okay, that one's really good. What would you do if you can't figure something out? I see that one a lot.
That's a tough one. And I'll be honest, that probably would stump me a little bit, um, to be honest. But what I would say, so you're saying if you can't figure something out, is that the question?
Some hiring manager will say, "Tell me about a time when you were at work and you couldn't figure something out. What steps did you take to
Mm.
figure it out?"
Okay. I would be really cautious and be really mindful about, did you try to punt it off? 'Cause like I used to say, I used to have an education background. Did you try?
Mm. Yeah,
Like
yeah.
I would say this to my kids, like, before you come and ask me, did you try? What are some things that you tried to do? So I would be really cautious about saying, well, I just asked my manager because I didn't know what to do. So being mindful about that and being able to communicate your strategy and your approach for problem solving. Because again, kind of like we said with the
Mhm.
last one, it's probably more of your interpersonal skills, your soft skills. Can you kind of navigate things? Did you try to utilize technology? Google, friends, chat GPT.
Yeah, yeah.
So even, and I know sometimes companies don't necessarily want to hear well, I chat GPT'd it, which is probably not the best thing to say in an interview. But it's a very real reality. It's like, I
Yeah.
leveraged and I utilized outside resources. That's another way to say I Googled it. Um,
Mhm.
or being able to say if it was something that I couldn't figure out, maybe listing out a couple of things that you actually did try to do, or I tried to leverage a colleague versus going straight to your manager about something. Or maybe I'm trying to think what else I would say for that. I
Yeah.
would probably try my best to not be your first thing that you say is I just asked my manager because I didn't know. But how is it that you tried to figure out your own solutions? Did you exhaust all your options? And then maybe taking that as an opportunity for learning in the future. It's like, hey, I exhausted these things. I still couldn't figure it out. And eventually I accepted that I needed to reach out to my manager. But now we've used this as an opportunity for me to learn and upskill in the future. So maybe when you're looking at professional development, you can say, we took this as a professional development opportunity now. So I tried. I still wasn't able to navigate it, but we built out a plan for me to get more comfortable and more confident with this versus sitting and not knowing.
Yeah. And like you said, it's definitely like more of that soft skills answer. The next question, number 10, are you a team player or independent? What do people say? Because some people are both. What do you say to that?
Yeah. And I probably would recommend kind of staying in the middle for this one.
Yeah.
And probably even depending on the role, to be honest. So I would probably try to tailor this, which again is kind of like when we talked about the services and things like that I offer, tailoring it a little bit. Because if you're in a role that's a little bit more of an individual contributor, you're really more of like knocking out projects, things like that. It may not necessarily be as important. But I would really recommend, kind of being able to showcase your adaptability of like, I'm one that I'm able to stay encouraged and motivated and stay on task to get things done that I need to get done. But I'm also always excited to be able to work alongside with my colleagues. I love being able to have opportunities to collaborate, support them if they have challenges or questions that they're coming up with. I'm always eager to jump in on different projects. And I'm also very much comfortable with being able to take responsibility for my portions of things and then coming back when we need to. So I would probably try my best to kind of give a little bit of that both where here's how I contribute to the team, but also here's how I'm able to maintain getting things done solo.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know why when I first had that question too, I'm like, I feel like I had to choose one.
Yeah.
And you don't have to choose them because
No.
I'm like, I can do both. I really don't care. I could be alone all
Yeah.
day. I could work with a team of 30. It doesn't really matter to me. I'll get my job done regardless. Like I know a lot of people in IT are like, I don't want to
Yeah.
talk to a team. I don't want to show my face on a video call. It's so funny. I'm like, but then our personality is like, I want to see everyone. I want to talk to everybody. Yeah.
And I would say even for like some of those more technical roles, being able to communicate that you can step outside of your shell a little bit in
Yeah.
certain situations, which is a reality. Like even when you
Mhm.
have those behind the scene roles, there's still other people involved. So, being able to say like, hey, I'm always excited to support. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be video calls or talking to somebody, but I love collaborating with my team via our Slack, which for some people that are a little bit more introverted or reserved, they do a lot better with those types of communications versus me. I'm like, hey, you got a second? Which I know people hate that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, they hate it. But I'm like, just call me. What's up? What's going on? Let's talk through it.
Yeah, yeah. My team used to hate that about me. All right, cool. So we kind of went over this one too, a little bit, and I like how you worded it before. But number 11, what leadership style do you prefer?
Yes. So this is one that I would say, this gives you an opportunity. I don't want to say flip this one, but my initial thought is to kind of flip it to learn a little bit more about that person, that hiring manager's leadership style. But I think if you're answering that question, you don't necessarily want to box in. It's so funny because hearing people say like, I hate being micromanaged. Um, or they're like, oh, I need lots and lots of support. But being able to speak a little bit to both, like being able to show your adaptability, hopefully you're adaptable, fingers crossed for that.
Yeah, yeah.
But being able to kind of communicate, I prefer to have my one-on-one check-ins consistently. I typically am one that I like to stay focused on my task and stay focused on my projects. And if there are questions or concerns that I have, I'm always one that's willing to reach out and ask those questions. But typically with my manager, I like to set up those different rhythms that we have. So the rhythm that you may prefer to have with your manager is I save all my questions for my one-on-one. Or you're
Mhm.
like me, and I probably ping my manager more times than he would like to get me in a day, because I would like to know the answer right now.
Yeah, yeah.
But I'm also I can hold those in. So I would probably say, I'd love to hear a little bit about your leadership style and kind of your communication norms that you typically have. because, I like to be able to have clear expectations, really have an understanding of your expectations for me. And I would also communicate that back. Like, if I reach out and ask my manager a question, ideally, I'd like to get an answer. Or if I'm in a one-on-one setting, being able to have that open dialogue to be able to walk through some challenges. But this really does give an opportunity to talk a little bit kind of back and forth of how you typically like to approach it, but also hearing from them too of like, I am religious to my one-on-ones with my team. I make sure I never cancel them. Or there's some that are like, I'm always available. Just reach out when you have questions, ping me, call me, whatever. So yeah.
Yeah. That's a great one. And then 3 more, 12, what motivates you?
Oh, so this is where, and I keep going back to the question it's a little bit. This kind of gives you like, if you've been able to ask questions throughout, this gives you an opportunity to kind of throw yourself a little jab, or not a jab, throw yourself a little alley-oop. For some of those things that they may have set are goals. So maybe one of the goals for the position is like developing a strategy for something. I'm really motivated by having new challenges to figure out, right? So you see where they told you a goal that they have, and now you're speaking about something that really does excite you. The job posting can help you with this. And also, again, that superpower that you have. So thinking about your strengths when you're thinking about what motivates you, even thinking about what is it and your reasoning and your why for what got you excited about this position. Not just necessarily always speaking so broad and so general. This gives you another opportunity to really kind of double down on what you researched about the company. Or, I would say I'm in an education company right now. And I hear people that like, I'm really motivated by making an impact on others. So, okay, that connects with the mission. I'm really excited about being able to solve problems and solve challenges. Okay, that speaks to one of the goals. I'm really excited about being able to connect with people. I'm motivated by my interactions with customers. All right. Now that speaks to the position specifically, if it's sales or marketing. I'm motivated and excited about being able to be creative. That speaks to that more of that marketing piece. So being able to kind of almost branch it out a little bit of like speaking to a little bit of the company goal, the company mission, and why that's exciting. Being able to speak a little bit to the position, being able to speak a little bit to the job function. Because again, managers, they're looking to you're trying to make their life easier. You're trying to make their job easier to make the right decision. And not that you're necessarily trying to like play games or anything like that, because it should be genuine. It should be real for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
And when you're bringing in those strengths that you have and you're bringing in the things that got you excited about applying from the beginning, is all going to be good stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, tying it back to those pain points, what they want, what the company's going for. That one's huge. All right, number 13, a little bit similar too, but why do you want to work here specifically?
Oh, this is a good one. And it's funny because when you were talking about LinkedIn, LinkedIn makes me laugh sometimes, I have to say. So I've seen a couple of people that are like, I want to work here because I need a job. That makes me laugh. Please don't say that in an interview.
Don't say that. It does make me laugh. But
It
you're
makes
not
me
going to
laugh.
get a job.
But I would say when you're thinking about the question around what is it that why you want to work here, this again is another way to show a little bit about your research that you've done. So being able to show some things that have stood out. So if you've had a conversation with the recruiter and they highlighted something really unique about the culture, because remember, you've asked that recruiter questions about culture before. You can tie back in and say, I'm excited about an opportunity to join an organization that does this, this, and this. I'm excited about an opportunity where I can make impacts like this, this, and this. Really being able to bring it back to the company, thinking about some of those questions again, if you've been able to ask those questions or some of that research you've done before. And especially I would say if you're in a interviewing process where there's multiple stages, being able to take a little bit of that information that you've learned previously and bringing that into your next interview. So you're excited about working here because I've met with some people from your team. It seems like a really exciting place to be. I'm really excited about the opportunity to contribute in some really unique ways. Some of my skill sets that I bring, I really think this is an environment where I can thrive and grow. I really see your leadership styles. I think that it really would connect with me and would help me continue to grow and develop all of those things. This is where you really want to kind of like hype them up almost to an
Yeah.
extent. Hyping up the company, the manager, your experiences that you've had. Hopefully you've had a positive experience up until this point.
Yeah.
But this is where you can show your preparation a little bit more too.
Yeah. I love how strategic your tips are in answering questions. Candidates always worry, well, how am I going to sell myself when they're asking all the questions? Well, it's through the answers.
Mhm.
And we're telling you today exactly how to do that. Like, this is how you showcase being a good candidate and how you can do the role. Like, you just use all these context clues throughout your interview process, take good notes. And yeah, it's work, honestly.
It
Interviewing is
is.
work, I think.
But it's worth it. It's worth it when
It's
you get
worth
to your
it. It's definitely worth it. Oh, man. People who are good at interviewing, they just shoot up and then you're not having to do 50 interviews to land one job. You know what I mean? Like, work on the front end is less work throughout. So last question,
All right.
number 14, where do you see yourself in 5 years?
I think I actually struggle with this question because I'm such a free spirited person. I'm like, I don't know. Please
Wherever
don't
the
say
journey
that.
takes me.
Please don't say that. Please don't say that.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but this is where, if you don't necessarily want to say, oh, I see myself here in 5 years, because that may feel a little cliche. You can kind of position it to where I see myself in a position where I'm able to continue to grow. I see myself in a position where I'm leveraging my strengths. I see myself in a position where I'm able to fine tune some of those areas of growth or development for myself. Almost describing your ideal position, right? Or your ideal company. And this gives that hiring manager a chance to kind of sell you a little bit too, right? So I really ideally see myself in 5 years being able to kind of make a next step. I'm hoping that I can get a promotion, whether that's a leadership. Some people want leadership.
Mhm.
Some people want to be more of having more responsibility. So if you're maybe a product manager, or maybe you're a product specialist and you're hoping to get to a product manager role, you can say, I'm hoping to see myself in a position where I'm able to have full ownership of a specific product line. Or maybe if you're in a tech support role that's looking to become an engineer, you can say, I ideally see myself in a position where I'm able to collaborate with the engineering team to potentially step into an engineering role. So you're not necessarily saying specifically that you're going to be there. Ideally, they would want you to be there, but you're painting a picture for them so they know, okay, in order for me to keep this person, I need to make sure that we're creating an environment for them to get these things that they're looking for. Because that question, from my perspective, it really does give that manager a chance to sell to you. Because if you're like, I'm really looking to be able to continue to use my strengths, I'm looking to develop in this area, this, that, and the third. You've probably already talked about these things previously, so now they can double down on it from their side of like, this is how I would cultivate that. This is how my leadership style would allow you to do X, Y, and Z. This is how we do career pathing here. Because if your goal is to become a product manager or become an engineer, here's how we would support you. And it even opens up an opportunity for you to get to ask a question. Is this something that you think would be realistic for me here? Is this something that you think that you could see for my projected future here? Now you can see, will you be there in 5 years?
Yeah,
Or
exactly.
is this gonna be a stepping stone for you? Which is
Yeah.
okay. Not that you don't necessarily want to say that or portray that directly in an interview. But that's okay if maybe the role is going to get you what you need for 3 or 4 years, and then you bump to whatever it is in another space. And some managers may be honest with you and they may say, hey, I don't see that being something that we could do here. And that's
Mhm.
okay too. And then this is where you get to ask yourself, is this a role that I'm okay with taking for this time where I'm able to develop certain skills and all those things to go into my next? Or are you really looking for a stable environment that you can grow in? So it's helpful for you too.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And then if the hiring manager, you answer and they move on, you can always bring it up at the end with your questions. So you can always bring it back and then it kind of gives you that open door to start asking like, well, what does my future
Yeah.
look like? Because they open the can of worms for that one. Nice. Well, I did not mean to keep you this long. But thank you
This is
so
great.
much for
No.
staying on and doing this was amazing, amazing, amazing advice. Honestly, like this is huge for people looking for a role. And if they've never had any type of like training, if you're stuck in your career, I want to say stuck in your career, but maybe you're stuck job searching and you keep having that first interview. You're not passing that first one. What are you doing wrong? I bet you $1,000,000 it's you can probably find the answer in here. It's probably something that we've went over today. So again, Kiandria Grimes on LinkedIn. She offers services through your job search, your resume building, not writing, resume consulting, and interview prep, whether it's one-on-one or a group session. It's so vital. As you heard the stats before, like 47 to 50% of people aren't getting the job because of interview prep and questions. Just those two right there. Thank you for coming. This was amazing. So insightful. This is awesome. And yeah, check her out. And if you have any questions, shoot them in the comments or message me. And if you have a question about her services, message her directly. If you message me, I'll pass it along. But thank you for listening, guys, and have a good day.